And I'm really very pleasantly surprised by the work that's been done by our technical people, and also for all of you that have made this possible. And I believe Jim Biffle is one that should get some credit for coming up with the idea, and so thank you, Jim, for thinking of this. It's a lot better, a lot clearer, a lot easier to read, so we want to make everything possible. And we don't know whether it's apostolic or not, but we're really not too terribly concerned because we know that they had a hard time with electricity back then. Okay, now you may wonder what relevance the mouse has with the earphones on. Well, this to me is one of the cruel things going on in animal testing today. Is the mouse has been made to listen to a Miley Cyrus recording. And it's resulted in extreme stress for the mouse. So I think we ought to get behind a movement to ban this and make it Mozart for the mouse. We'll call it the Mozart for Mouse movement and see what happens. Okay. Actually, I just made that up. I don't want you to call Miley and tell her that we insulted her today. So I'm sure she'd be more than happy to talk to you. Okay, now let's see if we can get in touch with the thought Paul has as he begins to close down the book of Galatians. And he's going to be working through what it means to be a spiritual person. And that's something I think we've all struggled with a little bit. We know that Paul said right at the outset that you started in the Spirit in chapter 3. You started in the Spirit and now you want to finish up in the flesh. In the flesh, of course, meaning relying upon human ability, relying upon what we can do as people rather than what God can do. And it's kind of self-reliant sort of stuff. And so what does that actually play? How does that play out? What does that mean? Well, he doesn't mean just that you began in the Spirit in your conversion, but that the Spirit is going to be with you throughout your whole Christian experience. Because we need all the help we can get. That's basically what it's all about. Now, legalism says, do it yourself. And God says, you're going to need all the help you can get through my Spirit. So you started in the Spirit, Paul says, and you want to continue in the Spirit because it's really kind of where the journey takes you. Now, this is our lead-in to chapter 6, and we've gone through this a couple of times already, maybe more than once. Some things are worth repeating, I believe. Repetition, they say, is the mother of learning. I don't know whether it's true or not. Sometimes it just bores you a little bit. Anyway, this closes out chapter 5. Well, of course, for Paul, there was no chapter 5. It was all just one letter. He didn't realize that in the Middle Ages sometimes somebody would divide these verses up to make it more convenient for us. But it makes it a little more episodic. It makes it a little bit more fragmented and sequential for us than just reading it through and forget there are verses there. But anyway, this is a lead-in to what's in chapter 6. It's pretty obvious here that he says, well, the Spirit gave you life. You're alive because the Spirit gave you life as a Christian. The Spirit came into your heart, and in your conversion, you were baptized in water and the Spirit, Jesus said, John 3:5. And so now let's get in step with the Spirit. And let's align your life up with the Spirit. Follow the directions of the Spirit. Let the Spirit lead you, whatever you want to say. It kind of meshes with that idea. And for Paul, it meant something about your behavior rather than it meant something about the way you felt. Of course, in our modern world today, the Spirit is often connected with experiences that people have as Christians. And I'm not against experience. I think we all need experience. But remember, experiences are never definitive. They don't mean anything to the other person. They may be definitive for you, but they're not for anyone else. They're not a norm for anyone else. But Christian behavior is definitive for everyone. And that's why the Spirit comes mainly to help us with our behavior and to help us with our acceptance and treatment of one another. So one of the things that Paul is concerned about is that he detects in them, because of the onset of legalism, a sort of number one first attitude. Me first. I'm doing better than you. I've achieved more than you. Why aren't you more like brother so-and-so? Kind of like those of you that may have been raised where you were said, why aren't you more like your sister? Or why aren't you more like your brother? Or something like that. And you know how horrible that is. And so that's the kind of thing going on. And this, I've seen this happen myself, and I've told you a story or two about seeing it actually playing out in congregational life. We all need to be more like brother so-and-so who's done this, and he's more successful than the rest of us, etc. So it's a very human thing, and it's seen in salesmanship, and it's seen in all kinds of ways, and maybe that's okay in those kind of situations, but in the family of Christ, that's not the way we need to go. So we want empathy recognition, and the way we get it sometimes is to irritate. And I translated prokaleo. Prokaleo is a word that only occurs here in the New Testament. It doesn't occur anywhere else. It's the only time. And it meant in classical Greek to call somebody out to a public argument or debate of some sort. Or to call someone out, to chew them out in front of others, like the boss might call you in, and chew you out in front of everybody or something like that. How horrible that would be. Or if you ever had a teacher chew you out in class in front of everybody. I had that happen to me once or twice, mainly because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. But it is a little embarrassing, but I got over it. It didn't stop me. I kept asking questions. But still, when a teacher says to you, are you stupid or something, it's hard to come up with a good answer. So that's kind of would be fit under that heading of prokaleomai, that is to call somebody out. So they're challenging each other. And I actually was around a fellowship at one time that had sort of official challenging going on. People were supposed to confront and challenge each other, and they were trained to. And some of you may even remember, we had a few of these people attend here several years ago, and they would come into the assembly, and they would say things to someone like Wade here. They'd say, did you just drive up in that brand new Buick? And Wade said, yes. Of course, that isn't true in his case. But and then they would say, this I've had people come to me and say, and then they would say, well, you sure are wasting a lot of money on a new car that you could be given to the Lord. And they were taught to do that. It was called provoking. And they believed it was scriptural. Well, according to Paul, it's not. It's not scriptural, because what it does, it shows a lack of love and it shows a lack of appreciation of where a person is. And it's based on envy. They really wanted your Buick, you see. That's what it really was all about. So, like, how dare you drive one when I don't have one? Or maybe something like that was going on. So then we move into chapter 6 then, and here we kind of arrive at the point where we want to say, well, what I want to do then is begin relying on the Spirit, and what difference is that going to make in my life? And, okay, there we go. So, I have here the fruit of the Spirit like a wine bottle to connote that it won't make you drunk. Now, I think people drink for the same reason that the Holy Spirit comes in our lives. Now, I know I'm going to have to spend the rest of the class explaining that, but let me try to explain that to you. People go to bars for fellowship. They go to bars so they can sing together. They go to bars so they can be accepted non-critically, right? But in order for that to happen, they have to get drunk, because normally you're not going to accept somebody unless you're a little bit half-looped, most people. And it loosens your tongue, you begin to sing. Now you sing stupid songs, usually. But they're singing, and that's sort of the ape of what God had in mind for the church. He wanted people under the influence of the Spirit to stay in their right minds, and yet be able to relate to one another, and yet be able to have a good time, and yet be able to sing, and do all the things that are really good and fun that people try to do in bars, but they got to be half loaded to do them, see? But now you're going to have the Spirit in your life, and you won't get drunk, and you don't have to worry about, no one ever got a ticket for driving under the influence of the Spirit. At least I haven't heard of that. Maybe somebody out in Tulsa or something may have, but I don't know. All right, so you say, this is for me then. I want to partake of the Holy Spirit then. I don't really need to go out there and get drunk. In fact, and Paul actually says that at a certain point, doesn't he? No longer be drunken with wine, but rather be filled. You know that passage as well as I do, right? We all read it every day. Now, moving on here with our little brand new equipment, and you notice I'm clicking away at it, and it's going to work. It is going to work. Let's have faith, okay? Okay, well, I don't think we can pray for this remote. Ah, there it goes. Will help us grow. Did you see that part came in? Okay. All right, now, go on back. Click twice. Okay, I got to get used to this equipment, see? It just has to think about it a minute, okay. Well, let me tell you what that said before. No, there it is, okay. You have to be adaptable. You know that. If you use AV, you better be adaptable, right? All of you that use it know that very well. Now, I want to say, how does this, yeah, you can read that. See, a lot of you in our can because my monitor is smaller than yours. But here we have what Paul's saying. Brothers, if anyone is overwhelmed by sin, I don't know how to really accurately translate this verb. This verb means, in the active voice, to do something before somebody else does it. Say, send in your bills a month before they're due or something. That's a pretty lousy illustration. Let's see. How about if something needs to be done, like give blood, and you go give it first. It would be used in a positive way, but it also means to start setting the trend in sinning in a way. In other words, you kind of get out of the group and you go out there and you do something you shouldn't do. And so all of a sudden you're caught up in something. In fact, it even has the meaning sometimes in the passive voice of being caught up in something. So you get caught up in sin. It's not like you sit there and you plan it. You're not like some kind of goofy planner in Ocean's 11 or one of these things, or remember Mission Impossible where you plan something out. I'm going to sin here on January 31st, and here's exactly what I'm going to do. Number one, it's just, it happens. And it's not like a life you're dedicated to sin, but you get caught. And everybody knows situations where that happens. You say later, what in the world? You know, and you get caught. But it makes a mark on you. It's indelible. So what should we do with a person like this? Well, maybe a lot of people would say, well, you know, they're disposable. Let's throw them away. They're disposable. We live in a society, obviously, of disposables, right? And much of that's good. Say in the medical field, I don't want to use a needle again that somebody else just used. So if you want to throw it away, that's cool with me. Now, I used to have autoclaves and all that where people weren't all careful with those things. So I suppose a certain amount of that's probably good. How about diapers? I don't know. Did most of you raise your children? Raise them using cloth diapers? There was no such thing as Pampers or Huggies, right? Right? Isn't that right? Don't you remember all the fun you used to have with that? And you will admit that even though it may be a little wasteful, it's a whole lot more easy. It's a lot easier to use disposable diapers. So we're kind of going along with that, right? But then, you know, we throw everything away anymore. You know? In fact, you ever heard this term planned obsolescence? It's where you plan for something to break about time you drive the car out of the lot, you know, well, maybe a little later. You know. And so the whole idea is that you don't want a computer. I mean, you buy a computer today, you say, I got the state of the art. You know, I got the state of the art. I got an i7 processor, you know, or I've got the latest Mac. And you take it out of the store, it's out of date. I mean, it's out of date already, you know. I mean, turn it on. If you don't believe me, it's going to update it 50 times before you ever get to type a single line. And every time I turn my computer on, I wait 20 minutes for it to update itself, you know. It's always out of date for some reason. You know. Now, I don't know what it is. You know, it's like bugs, you know, living in a software. Now, the thing is, you see, with all this obsolescence, we treat people the same way. They get thrown away too. And there's just statistics, you know. Well, we're going to lay this many off or that many off, and no real consideration being given, just the bottom line is the controlling fact. Well, now, for Paul, that was unacceptable. You don't throw anybody away. You restore them. Now, he said that's what spiritual people do. Spiritual people don't particularly go out and do flips. Now, if you want to do a flip, go right ahead, have a flip. I mean, you know, be my guest. Try not to hurt yourself, though, because I'm not sure your insurance covers that. But what you need to understand is what Paul's trying to say is spirituality meant being on the alert for that individual who's been overtaken by sin, who's been overtaken, and their life has come off track. And now he says, what I want you to do is to restore them. But I want you to do it with a spirit of gentleness, not with a spirit of provocation, not with a spirit of ugliness or harshness. How many of you have ever seen these kind of situations where parents have disowned their children? You know, and a kid is told, don't darken my door anymore. And there's no way back for that kid. I mean, there's just simply no way back. The parents feel very good about this. They don't feel good, but they feel justified, I suppose you might say. Is that really a good biblical stance? Probably not. Because a really spiritual person is always open to restoration. So in the kingdom of grace, if there's repentance, there's always forgiveness. But you got to be alert to help these people, he says. And one of the things you need to do is to be aware of yourself, or to take advantage of yourself. To look at yourself, so to speak. So let's think a little bit about what kind of person is a restoring person. Are you sort of a restoring person, okay? And it's got to chew on a little bit. Now what it'll do is advance 3 slides at once, okay. The essence of spirituality is sharing. Now, that's what I believe he's saying here. It's sharing your life in a productive way with others by helping them get back on track, restoring them. So the Christian life is essentially a life of sharing. Now, as I begin thinking about this, what he's really saying, I think, in a sense for the church, is that we are God's gift to each other. We're all wrapped up in this package, you see. You, me, and everybody is sort of how do I get you as a brother? Now, when you go to college, if you're approached sometimes by people who want to rush you. You've been through rush in college, right? You're rushed for fraternity or sorority. Well, what do they say to you? When they come to you, they say, you're so beautiful, you'll attract guys. We want you in our sorority. Or your dad's got a lot of money and the chapter needs refurbishing. Or to a guy, you're a football player and you'll attract lots of girls. Or your dad is loaded, that's always in there somewhere. It's something you can do for them. I don't recall a fraternity at any school I've ever been at, even Lipscomb, that would come and find a really loser person, no nerd to the max, a loser all the way, doesn't know anything about dressing or anything, carries outdated briefcase, whatever, and hey, you're so pitiful and you're so miserable, we need you in our fraternity. It just doesn't happen. There is no such, even an Animal House fraternity, doesn't even do that. You can do something for them. Say if you join the Marine Corps, well, what do they say? What do you see lightning, hear thunder, you're in. All right. Now, you've got to have some qualifications to be in almost every group. You think you get in the country club just because you want to? No, you got to go through screening. Now, the church is the only group you're not qualified to be a part of. It's sort of like Groucho Marx said, I wouldn't join any club that would have me as a member. And in a way, that's true of the church. None of us deserve to be in it. So the only way you get in is because God lets you in. And that means that everybody in the church is a gift from God to the other person. And it's the only way you ever get them. You don't get them because they just, wanted to be a part of it. Now, maybe some people do get in that. I don't know if that happens. Maybe it does. But I think what I'm trying to drive at here is that biblically speaking, we're just all gifts to one another. So you're God's gift to me, and I'm God's gift to you. And you say, well, couldn't God done a better job giving me a present? Well, yeah. I mean, the kids don't always like what you give them on Christmas, right? You've got 5-year-olds that love clothing for Christmas presents? I don't think so. This is not going to happen. They want an Xbox game or something, hopefully they don't want, well, let's not go there. But we're really God's gift. And so how do you handle these gifts? You say, well, you are a gift of God to me then. So I need to be using my relationship with you in a very positive way. Now, he's kind of saying we're all in this together, see? We're just all in, and we're fragile, right? We're all fragile. But we're all in this together, right? And some of us are in different places. But we're in it together, and we have common goals. We all want to go to heaven. We all want to be blessed by God. We all want to live in the Spirit. We have common enemies, Satan and all evil, and all viciousness and unhappiness and crime in the world. We have common enemies. And so, begin to look at all the things we have in common and that we plan to spend eternity with each other. Maybe you can understand why Paul is on fire to get a group of people who, living in the Spirit, will treat each other with decency and respect. Why it can't be just another casual association. Okay, so that's why he's really driving it here for us to recognize that. Now, being spiritual means then, it seems to me, kind of some things about our relationship with each other. First of all, you can't be dishonest with your brother. You can't. There's some horrible stories that I know that you've heard. A man, I overheard this conversation. A man moved to Nashville. And he said, "Where shall I go to church?" And he's a member of the Church of Christ. And someone said, "Well, what do you want?" "Well, I need to go to a church where there's lots of pretty important people." "Well, I recommend so-and-so," the man said, "because there's lots of really important people that are heads of corporations and professional people at that congregation." Is there anything wrong with that idea? Is there something wrong there, do you think? What happened to the prayer? God, send me to the fellowship that really needs me, or that I really need. Can you get anything out of going somewhere because you're only trying to get an advantage out of using somebody in a business way? You say that doesn't happen. Oh, well, yeah, sure. That'd be nice if it didn't. But it does happen, and it happens all the time because people don't plug in on the central idea that Paul's coming up with here. You don't deceive a brother. You're not there to use that person, to take advantage of that person. Or another thing, you've got to be open. We've got to develop openness, because that seems to me what Paul is really saying here is be open. Well, it's supposed to say that, and it probably will. There it is. Okay. I don't need to go in somewhere and everybody's got a mask on. You know what I'm saying? It'd take me 10 years to figure out who you are. Now, I'm not saying this is delicate. You can't exactly have that on your sleeve. Okay, time for fellowship. Get up. Hey, how are you? I'm Joe. I've been struggling with a problem of alcohol for 40 years. It's good to meet you. We're not, you got to have a certain amount of basis before you open up and be transparent. But I'm saying we need to move in that direction as much as we can. So you can feel comfortable being open and being transparent. I don't want to be like the four psychiatrists who go out and who start having a good time and they begin discussing their greatest falling, and one psychiatrist says, I just have this intense desire to kill all my patients. And then the next psychiatrist says, I really would rather be in some other business than this, but I'm kind of stuck. This is where my degree's in. And the other one said, I had this problem for years. I always gossip about everything everybody tells me. So So we're God's gift to each other, but then I can't deceive, and I have to be transparent. I need to work on transparency. Now, a lot of that has to do with church atmosphere. A lot of atmosphere in churches do not encourage honesty among members or transparency among members. You're just kind of this bag of marbles that bump up against each other on Sunday, but there's never any body or integration in the group. And that happens so much. And yet Paul knows, as the Spirit knows, we need each other, and we need to interact, and we need to be able to find somebody we can be transparent with, and we can be open with. And if we can't find it here, we're going to find it where we're going to find it somewhere else. And maybe we find it in a bar, and maybe we find it with somebody we really don't need in our lives, but we all need to be listened to. And that's what Paul says the fellowship is all about. Now, so you who are spiritual, restore. All right, so let's think about that a minute. What does restore mean? Now, the verb is, those of you that are into Greek, is katartizo. Katartizo is used in the gospel for the mending of nets. Now, why would you mend a net? Well, you're doing the fish a favor if you have holes in your net, okay? Let's throw my net out here. Well, it's got all kinds of holes in it. Well, yeah, it's supposed to have some small holes, but not real big ones like that. And you're not going to catch much that way. So it's actually, the verb means to put something back in good condition, or basically to make something serviceable, useful again. Now, there are people I've discovered who have a way of looking at things to see how it might be made useful again, or how they see the potential. See, what is he asking us to do? Let's see the potential in people, even people who have fallen away. Let's see their potential and what they'd be like if they were made useful again in the Lord. That's exactly what he's driving at here. So, restore then is kind of a state of mind that you have to want to restore someone. It doesn't really have anything to do with dragging somebody down the aisle particular or anything like that. It has to do with making them useful again in the service of the Lord. So I'm thinking spiritual people see the potential others have if they can get back on track with the Lord. They see that person benefiting from that and blessing others with that. And so they restore them, but as they do it with a sort of sense, I guess, of looking at a table, and someone might say, "Oh, table! Look at that table! It's terrible. It's all the paint's coming off. Everything's bad." Another person would look at that table and say, "That would make a gorgeous table." And it's a matter of refinishing. It's a matter of putting some work in. It's a matter of working with it, and it's going to be useful. It's going to be beautiful. I have a dresser in mind. I'm not holding myself as a paradigm of this at all, but every now and then I look as I see the possibility of something. And I went in one of these used furniture stores. You know, you've all been in there, right? And there was a lime green dresser. Now, why anyone in their right mind would paint a dresser lime green, I don't know. I'm guessing they had a sale at the paint store. I may be wrong. It's like I passed out in Florence, somebody painted their church building violet. Violet. Why would you do that? The only thing I could understand is the Lowe's had to get rid of a whole bunch of violet paint, and so they bought it up and it was cheaper. I mean, why else would you do it? But it's okay, I suppose. But, you know, it certainly got your attention when you drove by. Now, you want to do that here? No, we don't. Now, the thing is that in the used I saw the lime green dress, and I opened the drawer. Now, one thing I do to look at a drawer, does the drawer have glides in it, or is it just kind of stuck in it? You know, there's a lot of little things. Even I know about furniture. I don't know a lot. But I know a good name, and when it said like Bassett or something like that, I knew it wasn't cheap. So I had to look past the lime green, and so I bought it. And I got it pretty cheap. Took it home. You stick it out of the garage and get all that lime green off. And underneath is this beautiful walnut veneer. See, there it is. And so I put some work in, and now I won't say it's the greatest dresser on the planet Earth, but it's not lime green anymore. And you get up in the morning and you look at it, you don't go into a cataclysm of any kind, and it doesn't shock your eyes. And so you see potential, and that's what spiritual people do. They look at people and they don't say, "Oh, Joe Blow, drop out, you lousy jerk, you. I'm not going to have anything to do with you anymore. I'm going to shun you," because that's a practice in a lot of groups. I see the potential you have to be brought back to the Lord. So spiritual people are people who see the potential in others. That's what Paul's saying. We all need to develop that capacity, obviously. And then once, you know, that happens. Now, if you start thinking about it, all of us have potential, but you can let yourself go, don't you think? You can let yourself go spiritually, right? People do that. So how'd you like, say, let's think this car. Can you see this car? This is Syrian. This car is found in Damascus. This may explain its condition. I don't know. I suppose that'd be a good car. Would you like that car? Or would you rather have this one? You know, which really would you rather? You see, you know, when you look at the Buick, you think, well, that was a great car one day, but it's sure fallen on hard times, right? People didn't take care of it. So I don't care if somebody gives you a Rolls Royce, you still have to change the oil, right? It doesn't matter. It just wasn't taken care of. We don't know why. But the other car not only has been taken care of, but it's obviously been restored and it's kind of a beauty. And if you go out, say, and try to sell that on the open market now, Ron, what do you think you could get for that, maybe? A couple of dollars, huh? At least? Yeah, you could do okay with it, right? Because you'd have a hard time prying your hands off the wheel, but still, if you were to sell it, you'd do okay. But somebody had to care, you see. Now, here is even a better example, I think, of restoration. Now, would you see any potential here at all? He does. This man sees potential. Okay. Does anybody know what car this is? Come on, come on, come on. It's a 1932 Buick. Sorry about that, Jim. You weren't alive then. You wouldn't know. I'll have to admit, I don't see a lot of potential here. You know what I'm saying? Do you? He does. I mean, it's not a sin if you don't. Oh, you do? Okay. Okay, well, what's done to this car? Okay, let's take a look. And we hopefully take a look. Whoa. Whoa! Wouldn't you like to cruise around Nashville on this, huh? 1932 Buick, all restored. You see, somebody had to see the potential. Now, can you imagine that a human being is that way? You say, that guy has let himself go spiritually. He's a dropout. He's of no value at all. Oh, my word. If we could just see the potential in people like that, Paul says, and restore them with a spirit of gentleness. Don't do it in a mean way. Looking to yourself. Why should you look to yourself when you're doing something like this, when you're trying to help somebody? Could it be because if you don't have a good spirit, you're going to be proud? Proud that you're faithful and they're not? Proud you're better than that? Could that be the sin he's talking about? You might need to look to yourself. Or could you decide that this priority of hanging around with this guy and everything is that you just sort of forget your own spirituality and become like him and let him tempt you away? Is that what he's talking about here? But why do you need to look? Well, you always need to examine yourself, don't you, in every situation. Well, what am I trying to do here? What is this all about? I need help. I need all the help I can get. So he says, look to yourself, lest you also be tempted, right? But what a great thing to have in mind for everybody is something to restore them to complete usefulness. Okay. The next section that he talks about is that this kind of work won't get done by one individual. It's got to be shared. We've got to get in this together. It takes more than one to carry the burdens. Now, if you notice, he talks about bearing burdens here, but he says it in a way that it ought to be shared. We are to bear the burdens of one another, so it does take more than one. And one person tries to carry a heavy load, I want to tell you, it's, I'll get that thing in a minute here, just a little patience. There we go, to carry heavy burdens. This lady, she's doing a really good job with it, but I know this has got to be awkward. And it would be so much easier. Where is the husband? Well, we don't know. He may be at home trying to get the Titans in on a TV set like this. We don't know. But he's not there helping her, whatever. And so we physically, burdens we all know we need help with. But spiritual burdens we really even need more help with. We need somebody to be there to help us with those burdens. Now, the thing is, let's say, that's the kind of thing here. If you notice, you see, some people think there's a contradiction here because it said, each must carry his own burden. And it said, bear one another's burden, but each must carry his own load. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means everybody who helps and cooperates in lifting a heavy load has got to do their part. Now, you take a piano. I never moved a piano. I wouldn't even want to try, but here's the people moving a piano. Now, one of the things you'll notice, if you keep your eyes open really good, and I understand, don't be judgmental about this, there are some people who only pretend to be lifting. That's right, your brother-in-law. Yeah, you brought him over to help you move your piano. There's 5 guys and your brother-in-law, and 5 guys are doing all the work, and your brother-in-law is like just holding the bottom of the piano, basically. And he's not carrying his share of the load. And he says, it's so much easier when everybody picks up their share of the load. Don't fake carrying a load. Take your share of it. So that's what I think he means when he says everybody has to bear their own burden, is that you individually have got to take up part of the load if you're going to lift a lot. Now, we all know 5 people can definitely probably lift a piano. But if 5 are faking it and only one's lifting it or whatever, it's going to be a disaster. So everybody has to share. Now, if you start thinking along this line, now Paul says, we interrupt this message for a commercial. I mean, that's kind of what he does here if you look at it. He's right in the middle of all this. He says, Let him who is taught in the Word share with him who teaches in all good things. So I take this as a commercial break. Okay, don't forget your Bible teacher, Paul says. Don't forget your neighborhood apostle. All right, so we got that done. That's pretty important, what we need to share with them. That's what he says. Help your Bible teachers out. All right. Now, moving on then back to the message, he says, now why does he introduce this particular saying here? Well, let's go back. I'll get all this figured out sooner or later, okay. Can you see the brand of that wine? Anybody? What is it? Nosy wine, okay. The idea is, and he keeps coming back to this, people, you got to understand God is pretty well aware of your attitudes. That God, you're not going to fake this Christianity. Now, he's a very odd word in Greek here to describe mocking God. It actually means to turn up your nose at God. Now, the word for nose here is not the regular word for nose, ris, but it's mukter. Mukter means more like a snout. Don't turn up your snout at God. In other words, that seems sort of odd. But it's a sort of a gesture in the ancient world of disdain. And in the Psalms, you see these guys saying, what does the Almighty know? Sniff, sniff, sniff. In other words, there are people who feel like even God doesn't really keep up with them. He says, that's not true. It's very important. It's very important to God that we reach out and touch the lives of others and bless them and become a sharing people. It's not something that's not material to God. Now, sometimes we think, well, the biggest things to God is that we get everything right. We use the right version of the Bible, and that we have the right doctrine, and that we do this right and that right, and we don't do this wrong or that wrong, and God's more concerned about how you're treating each other. See, that's what he's trying to get across. So don't mock God by mistreating each other. But he says, even being spiritual takes a toll on you, and you're going to have to realize you need endurance. It's a long journey. And we take a long journey, oftentimes, or you sow, crops. A farmer sow a crop. He's not going to throw it in the parable of the sower today. He doesn't throw it instantly. He gets a tomato. There's a ding-bong, a tomato. Okay. Now, Bill Balcom here had a compost patch one time behind his house that was about that powerful, though. He had spent years developing it. And he said it was so potent that you could throw a tomato seed on it and the tomato would pop up in 5 minutes. Now that's rare. You don't see many of those. But normally it takes a little time. So no farmer ever believes he's going to get instant results. So it's the same thing spiritually. It's not. There's no instant spirituality. Now people say, well, we have instant everything else. We have instant oatmeal. We have instant cream of wheat. We have instant, and we have even instant Christians just add water. So we believe in that. But actually some things do take time. And I remember something, President Garfield, who was President of the United States, one time was President of Hiram College, was approached by a lady. She said, how long does it take to get a degree in your school, Hiram College? He said, it takes 4 years normally of matriculation. And my son wants to go to college, but he doesn't have 4 years. He's only got 3 months. Can you work something out for him? And President Garfield said, Madam, when God wants to make an oak tree, he takes several generations. When he wants to make a squash, he takes 3 months. It is so out there, and you've got to hang in there because things come along that can make it really difficult for you. But if you begin sowing to the Spirit, you can get worn out. So you get weary and well-doing, as it's supposed to go back to it. Let's see. I don't know why I'm not getting this to work. There it is. Well, I pushed it backward and it went to the forward one. That's cool. All right, it works just as well. I was trying to show there how spiritual burnout can really impact you after a long, long haul. You get to feeling unappreciated. You get to feeling tired. You get worn out. You hadn't seen a new vision like you need to see every now and then. But really, it's time like that, more than anything else, I believe you need to keep on. Now, if you've ever read A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis or others, you know how this feels. It's called a dry period in your life. But everyone, even those closest to God, go through this period. And even Jesus on the cross went through a period of rejection. It's going to happen. In fact, it's a good sign that you're on the right track if you get tired once in a while. And if you do, and if you keep on keeping on, I believe you're going to come out on the other end fine. And finally, he says, it's a great crop. If you sow the Spirit, you reap the Spirit, eternal life. And then the final thing is, folks, we got to realize this. As God's people, you know, we're not under a dome. We're not restricted except by our own imagination. And there's this TV series now about people living, I'm not sure what the purpose of it is. I tried to figure it out the other day, but it seemed like a regular soap opera was taking place under a dome. So I guess that changes things. But, you know, sometimes we live like that, like we can't get out here and can't make a difference, or we're all locked in our little dome. Well, it's not true. This is just a launching pad of operation for the Holy Spirit, you know. So being a spiritual person means I'm going to care about you, and I'm going to see the potential in you, and I'm going to look at myself as much as I need to, and I'm going to avoid pride, and I'm going to invest in you because my God is invested in me. Well, thanks for being here today, and we're trying out our new technology, and we get it all down, it'll be perfect, and if it is, even if the teacher isn't.